Hunting has always been a controversial topic. Some see it as necessary for food, population control, or managing invasive species. Others think of it as a sport for trophy hunters. But for Dave Warner and his friend Nick Ciarlante, it had never been about trophies. That is, until the night they crossed paths with the biggest wild hog they'd ever seen. Dave and Nick weren't born into the hunting life. They had spent most of their lives as city guys, only taking up hunting in the last 10 years. They started with guided trips, learning the ropes from seasoned experts. It was an expensive way to begin, but it helped them build skills quickly. Wild hogs became one of their favorite targets, especially after their first trip to Lake Eufaula, where they bagged their first hog. A year later, they decided to hunt near Macon, Georgia. Their guide, a 25-year-old named Brandon, had promised them a proper hunt, one that wouldn't involve sitting in a stand, waiting for an easy shot, tracking wild hogs the old-fashioned way. At 3:30 a.m., after a long, uneventful day, Brandon asked if they were ready to pack it in or if they wanted to keep going. "Let's hunt," Dave said without hesitation. Brandon grinned. He loved hunters willing to put in the extra effort. They grabbed their rifles and headed into the thick, dark woods of Twiggs County. Hog hunting on foot is no joke. There are no tree stands to keep you safe, no barriers between you and the wild. Just you, your gun, and the unknown. Every broken twig sounded like a potential threat. Every rustling leaf made their hearts pound. For hours, they moved slowly, stopping to listen every few yards. They covered swamps, pine forests, millet fields, and dirt roads. The night was eerily quiet, until it wasn't. Around 3:30 a.m., as exhaustion was setting in, Brandon stopped suddenly. "There they are," he whispered. "Hear 'em?" They froze, listening. A deep chorus of grunts and squeals echoed through the night. It was a large pack of hogs, dozens of them. Dave steadied his Henry lever-action .30-30 rifle, heart pounding. The next few seconds would determine everything. The spotlight blazed to life, cutting through the darkness. "There they are," Brandon shouted. Hogs erupted in every direction, running full speed. He picked the biggest one, a massive brindle-colored beast sprinting across the field. He barely had a second to aim. Instinct took over. He lined up his shot just behind the ear and squeezed the trigger. Brandon turned to him. "Did you hit one?" Dave wasn't sure. It had all happened so fast. Slowly, they approached the field, rifles at the ready. If the hog was still alive, it could be dangerous. Wounded hogs have been known to charge and kill hunters who don't finish the job. Brandon's spotlight swept over the ground until it caught a massive heap of fur lying motionless in a low spot. Then it moved. "Shoot again," Brandon ordered. Dave fired a second shot, making sure the hog was down for good. As they walked closer, the reality of what had just happened sank in. It wasn't just a hog. It was the hog. The one hunters in the area had been trying to kill for years. Brandon let out a laugh. "Dude, you have no idea what you just shot." In the dim light, they could barely see the full size of the animal. But as they tried to move it, the reality hit them. It was enormous. Too big for the three of them to lift into the truck bed. Brandon made a call to some fellow hunters, letting them know the legend of the giant brindle hog had finally come to an end. "Some people are going to be bummed," he said with a grin. "This hog's been on trail cameras for years. No one ever got a shot at it." When they finally got it weighed, the number was shocking, 450 pounds. Before the night ended, Brandon asked, "So you mounting this thing?" Dave hadn't even thought about it. He wasn't a trophy hunter. But as he looked at the massive hog, he knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime hunt. Years later, Dave still looks at the mounted hog's head in his garage and remembers that night. The darkness, the rush of adrenaline, the perfect shot. It wasn't about trophies, but about the wild, unpredictable thrill of the hunt. And sometimes, when luck is on your side, you walk away with both. The swamp was silent. Too silent. Then a deep grunt. A shadow shifted. A legend stepped into the open. The rifle came up. Breath held. One shot, one chance. And in that instant, alone in the middle of 600 acres of river swamp, the reality of the wild set in. This wasn't just hunting. This was survival. Trey had dropped me off here, deep in the heart of Georgia wilderness. I had asked for it, but I didn't expect this. A storm was rolling in, rattling the trees, shaking the ground blind where I sat. The plan was simple: wait for the hogs to show up. But hours passed, and the night grew colder. The green light I had brought wasn't working. My flashlight was awkward to hold alongside my rifle, and my patience was wearing thin. Then, as if to mock me, the trail camera captured what I had been waiting for. Dozens of hogs moving right past my blind. But by then, I was already on my way back to camp. Classic hog behavior, wild and unpredictable. But this hunt wasn't over. The hunting grounds stretched across multiple counties, managed by Woods and Water Plantation, owned by Blaine Burley. With over 7,000 acres of land, the team could adjust on the fly, moving hunters to where the animals were. Blaine, a seasoned hunter and former Air Force captain, had turned these lands into a haven for deer, turkey, and wild hog hunting. "We can never fully get rid of them," Blaine said about the hogs, "so we manage them instead." That meant using everything from scouting cameras to carefully placed bait stations. The strategy worked. Hog populations were kept in check, preventing them from destroying crops and native wildlife. The thick swamp surrounded me. As the evening deepened, I stayed still, listening. Patience. That's what separates a successful hunt from a wasted night. Then, movement. A lone hog appeared from the shadows, jet black and just over 100 pounds. Not the one I wanted. I held my fire. 5 minutes passed. Then the ground seemed to come alive. One after another, hogs poured into the clearing. 15, maybe more. I adjusted my rifle, a Model 70 Winchester, and steadied my breath. But before I could pick my shot, something caught my eye. A shape, bigger than the rest, lurking at the edge of the woods. My heart pounded. This was the one. The giant boar stepped into the open. It was massive, shoulders towering over the rest. A true trophy. I took aim, but just as I steadied my shot, the beast jerked its head up and let out a deep, guttural woof. Instinct took over. The silence of the swamp shattered as the 30 out of 6 roared through the trees. The bullet hit hard, knocking the boar off its feet, but it wasn't done. It thrashed, trying to stand. One more shot sealed the deal. The hog was legendary in these parts, a beast that had been spotted on game cameras but never taken down. We struggled to load it into the truck. It took all our strength to lift even half of it. Later, when we weighed it, the scale read 450 pounds. This one's going on the wall, and with that, a new hunting tale was born. One of patience, instinct, and the night a giant boar finally met its match. The morning air was cold and crisp as Giulio Burattini zipped up his jacket and loaded his rifle. It was January in Piancastagnaio, Italy, and frost covered the ground beneath his boots. Giulio had been hunting for years, ever since he was a child. His father had taught him everything: how to track animals, how to be patient, and how to take the perfect shot. Hunting was more than just a hobby for Giulio. It was part of his life. Today, he and his father were hunting wild boar, one of the most challenging and dangerous animals in the Italian forests. For this hunt, Giulio brought his .308 Winchester rifle. The .308 Winchester is a popular choice for hunters because it's powerful, accurate, and reliable. Many hunters and even soldiers trust this rifle because it can take down big animals, as long as the shot is placed in the right spot. Giulio had other options. He could have chosen a more powerful rifle, like a .300 Winchester Magnum, but he wanted something lighter and easier to handle. The .308 was perfect for wild boar, at least that's what he thought. Over the years, Giulio had used this rifle to hunt deer, wolves, and smaller boar, and it had never failed him. But today would be different. Giulio and his father moved quietly through the frozen forest. The only sounds were the crunching of their boots on the frosty leaves and the occasional rustle of branches in the wind. Then they spotted it. A massive wild boar stood in the trees, its dark eyes watching them. It was huge, at least 265 pounds, with thick, bristly fur and long, curved tusks that shone in the morning light. This was the kind of trophy boar hunters dream of. Giulio's heart pounded. He knew he had only one chance. Taking a deep breath, he lifted his rifle, aimed carefully, and pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the forest. The boar collapsed instantly, its legs buckling under its weight. Giulio let out a sigh of relief. The shot had been perfect, or so he thought. Then the unthinkable happened. With a loud roar, the boar suddenly jumped up. It wasn't dead. It had only been stunned. The massive animal charged straight at Giulio, its hooves kicking up snow as it closed the distance fast. Giulio tried to lift his rifle, but he had no time. The boar was too fast. Before he could react, its tusks slammed into his upper thigh, cutting deep into his flesh. Then, the worst thing possible happened. The tusk severed his femoral artery. Giulio staggered back, his vision blurring from the pain. His father ran to him, shouting for help. With shaking hands, Giulio grabbed his radio and pressed the button. His voice was weak. His father pressed his hands against the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. But a femoral artery injury is nearly impossible to survive without immediate medical help. A few meters away, the boar finally collapsed, taking its last breath. But it was too late. By the time the rescue team arrived, Giulio was gone. Wild boar hunting is more dangerous than most people think. These animals are strong, fast, and unpredictable. Even with a powerful .308 Winchester, one bullet is not always enough. Most hunters follow the rule: never approach until you're 100% sure the animal is dead. Giulio paid the ultimate price for believing the hunt was over too soon. Now, his story is a warning for hunters everywhere. If the boar still moves, the hunt isn't over. A last-minute weapon change, an ill-equipped hunting party, and 30 hunters on the brink of disappointment. Wild boar hunts in Croatia are unpredictable, but sometimes those who endure the longest reap the greatest rewards. Greg had never hunted boar before, and when his friend Max called with an invitation to Croatia for the hunt of a lifetime, he didn't hesitate. The excitement was electric. Boars were cunning, fast, and dangerous. This was no deer hunt. But something gnawed at the back of Greg's mind. Neither he nor Max had ever used this hunting company before. Still, the promise was irresistible. A top-tier hunting experience. Rustic wood cabins, hearty breakfasts, a heated swimming pool, and a high-paced chase with 30 to 40 dogs driving boars towards the hunters. The numbers spoke for themselves. 35 boar taken last year with 25 guns, or so they claimed. Greg spent weeks preparing. The Croatian wild boar hunt demanded split-second reflexes and close-range accuracy, making it a perfect fit for his shotgun. His Benelli Super Black Eagle II, loaded with Rothweil Exact slugs, was his trusted companion on previous hunts. Holding it gave him an unshakable confidence, the kind you only get from knowing your weapon like an extension of yourself. Flights were arranged, paperwork was in order, and Greg went through all the necessary security checks. Everything was smooth, until he landed in Croatia. His gun never made it. Somewhere between the UK and Amsterdam, it had vanished. Greg stood there dumbfounded. He had spent weeks preparing for this, calling airlines, double-checking details, and still, here he was, gunless. Fury boiled in his veins. There was no choice now. He had to use a borrowed weapon. Max met him at the airport, and without wasting a second, they drove straight to a shooting range. Greg shouldered Max's Steer Mannlicher 3 out of 6, a precise, reliable rifle, but nothing like the shotgun he had trained with. The balance was off. The scope felt foreign. His confidence wavered, but he was hitting targets. He forced himself to adjust. Tomorrow was the real test. The duo arrived at what was supposed to be a 3-star lodge with heated cabins. Instead, what they found was a rundown dump. No swimming pool, no breakfast, just a tiny room with a single bed and a sink. They had been scammed. That night, they met the rest of the hunting party. 30 men from all walks of life, united by one passion. Stories were swapped, drinks flowed, but Greg and Max turned in early. They had come to hunt, not drink. Morning came early, 6:45 a.m. A weak protein-heavy breakfast was served, not ideal, but enough to get by. Then came another slap in the face. Paperwork, licenses, fees, bureaucratic nonsense that could have been sorted out weeks ago. Upon arrival, tension immediately took hold. Some hunters, longtime clients, demanded the best spots along the line. There was no lottery, just favoritism. The wind whispered through the trees. The air grew thick with disappointment. When the first drive ended, only one boar had been taken, and it was shot by the guide. The second drive was just as pathetic. The third drive was even worse. Miljenko, the guide, scrambled for excuses. The dogs can't pick up their scent. It sounded reasonable, but everyone knew the truth. They had been lied to. Half the group quit and went home. Greg and Max debated leaving. But one more try wouldn't hurt. The next morning, something felt different. Greg's heart pounded when he saw fresh boar tracks. Clumps of earth had been dug up where the boars had foraged the night before. Then, movement. 3 wild boar hurried across the track, completely untouched by hunters. Another shot rang out. A hunter startled awake, firing blindly. Max fired too. He had bagged a jackal. For the final drive, Greg was given a raised hide, peering over thick undergrowth. The moment he had waited for had arrived. A wild boar, 40 yards away. He squeezed the trigger. The boar bolted into the trees. He missed. But Miljenko, desperate to save face, offered Greg and Max a free nighttime hunt. They accepted, and they weren't disappointed. A massive shape emerged from the blackness. It was the biggest boar of the entire trip. Greg's heart pounded. This was it. The final shot. Squeezed the trigger. The boar collapsed. 220 pounds of wild Croatian boar, taken down in one perfect shot.